Well, moving on to our other flyweight championship bout, Valentina Shevchenko defends her belt in not quite as dominant fashion as one might expect, and yet I say that, but she still won 4 rounds to 1. I mean, it's amazing to see a woman to win 4 rounds to 1 and people to be disappointed in somehow in her performance almost. She had a very interesting strategy, I thought. She took down Maia 30 seconds into the fight when she clearly has the advantage on the feet. She's clearly faster. She's clearly more well-rounded. I had a very strong feeling based on that game plan that she didn't want to stand up. It was clear she doesn't want to stand up in the first 3 rounds, right? Like she was clearly taking her down immediately. I think it was one of 2 reasons. Either one, she might have still been injured. That MCL injury, she had surgery on it, on her knee. It's possible she hadn't been training as much on the feet, or she's still dealing with that injury a little bit and doesn't want to stand up, or doesn't want to re-injure, or isn't quite as active as she wants to be on the feet, and so she wants to eliminate that problem of being on the ground. Or my other theory, Valentina notoriously does not train for her opponent. Valentina just trains MMA. She just says, that's my lifestyle, that's what I do. I just train all day, I live MMA. But she doesn't actually necessarily have a training camp that's built around a game plan for the opponent. And because of that, she's going to be always in the training room, classically just doing kickboxing, Muay Thai, and transitioning right into the wrestling, right into the takedowns. It's just what her muscle memory has been doing for so long because she's just training in general. With Jennifer Maia, as we know, that's maybe not the best game plan. Of course, she still won, so of course we can't really take that much away from it. But it's not the game plan you would have expected against Jennifer Maia. But when she's training this anyway, even if she's thinking actively, I don't want to take her down, when you're in the octagon and you're just going through the motions, your muscle memory takes over. And I think she just was going for the takedown out of muscle memory. And I think that might have been part of what was happening, in addition, perhaps, to a little bit of an injury scenario.
It also could have been that, Maia is no slouch on the feet either. Like, she was handling the strikes pretty well and exchanging pretty well. And she had some great counters, and that, maybe Valentina wanted to bring her down to the ground a little bit, maybe suffer around, and sort of like get Maia to drain her energy a bit and like build, lactic acid in her arms. So in rounds 4 and 5, she can come back and strike without Maia having like good defense.
Or good power. Because Maia has power. Maia's knocked some girls out. So I think that also could be it, right? She wants to slow down those arms and get rid of a bit of that power, so she doesn't have quite the same pop, and she doesn't have to worry about being knocked out in the 4th and 5th, and she can kind of just work her striking, work her flow, and just outpoint her and maybe get the finish, which she didn't. But that's kind of to credit of Maia instead of I wouldn't say that's to Valentina's detriment. I think Maia is just such a tough girl. Valentina hits her with some solid shots, and Maia kept coming forward and was in there to win. In the 5th round, when Maia came out, she knew she was down, and she came out saying, I'm going to take her down, finish her out. Like, just get a submission. And like, her coach was motivating her, and she responded. It was impressive. Just Valentina's too good.
It was a very competitive fight, and like totally, for me, unexpected. I thought Valentina was just going to steamroll her, but I mean, both their stock went up, so it's good.
I mean, there's, I guess, 2 more points I want to bring up in here. So first of all, this reminds me a little bit of a GSP kind of scenario. So we see sometimes those champions that are dominant for a while, that were getting a lot of big finishes at the start, that were when working their way up, were very exciting fighters. After a while, you see this in Jon Jones as well. They start settling down a little bit. They're not really getting finishes anymore. They're a little bit more defensive. They have a bit more, for lack of better terms, boring fights. Just not as action-packed, not as risky as you saw earlier. Once they start defending for the 4th, 5th time. So we saw this in Jon Jones. We saw this with GSP moving to a much more wrestling-based game. And I think we're starting to see this with Valentina as well. We saw that Liz Carmouche fight that went to the full 5 rounds wasn't super exciting, wasn't super offensive. We saw Amanda Nunes as well. She started to move a bit more into the wrestling, a bit more into the safer style, like we saw in that GDR fight. So I think it might be a little bit of that of, hey, if you want to defend a belt in MMA 10 times, you can't be taking risks every time, because as good as you are, MMA is just too unpredictable of a sport. and eventually something is going to happen. And so it just might be that's kind of one of those more mature MMA style transitions that we're seeing her make.
Mm.
No, you seem like you're on the edge of saying something.
Once as you age, I guess, yeah, it becomes it's like, you know, as you get a little older, you just, I guess, you know, like other, you know, areas in your life, you just don't see as much value, I guess, the flashy stuff. You do what works, you do what's going to keep you from feeling damaged. And I think I've spoken on the podcast before about, I think that there's an element of, as you gain more experience in MMA, as you get older at the same time and become a veteran, I think that you lose a little bit of the killer instinct. I think that you're not as interested in like hurting people.
Someone.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think that happens to everyone. Certainly it doesn't. But you know, I think that for a lot of long-time champions, people who hold on to the belt for a long time, who are at the same time getting like the most possible veteran experience while also just getting older, I think a combination of those things will also just impact just how aggressive they are in general.
Can I just actually build on that point, and then Adam, you can go ahead. I just want to say, and not necessarily big champions, I would say it's the long-time martial artists that we see this more in. John Jones, I wouldn't say has lost that killer instinct. I think he might not be as offensive anymore, but I don't think he doesn't want to hurt people in there. I think it's the martial artists, the GSP, the Valentinas, those and the Amanda Nuneses, who are not in there to hurt people from the first place. They're in there to be the best martial artists that they can be. Those are the ones that might lose the killer instinct a little bit later on. Adam, what were you saying? We're gonna say?
I was just gonna say, like, I think it's important for these fighters to take the risk when going to the top, but when they're at the top, they don't want to risk that as frequently, because, you know, them being offensive puts them at risk for getting defeated. So that's why they have to be a little bit more on the defensive side as they rack up title defenses.
Yeah, you can also be more risky when you have less to lose and when you have more to gain, right? If you get a big knockout win and you have a better chance of getting a title shot, if you lose, you have to work your way up again, but you didn't just lose your belt. And when you lose a belt, it's hard to get a rematch and hard to get your belt back. And there's a lot more at stake. The last thing I was going to mention,
Max Holloway.
And what do you mean? He got a rematch, but now
he got the rematch very easily.
He did. Okay, fine. But I will say, so the other thing, so a lot of people for a long time have been talking about this trilogy fight between Valentina and Amanda Nunes. And as I was watching this fight, there's one thing I was thinking again and again and again, and it's that Valentina has no chance against Amanda. And the reason I say this is because Jennifer Maia was stronger than Valentina in there. Jennifer Maia was able to push her against the fence, hold her against the fence, grind her out. Jennifer was too much to dominate on the ground. Yes, she wasn't getting up. She wasn't really sweeping her or anything. But Valentina wasn't as dominant as you would expect. Jennifer was on top of her and doing damage. And I just kept on thinking, if that was Amanda in there, Amanda would be destroying her. Amanda on top of you is not something that Valentina, I think, could handle anymore. I just think that Amanda's too big and too strong for Valentina. Even if she puts on another 10 pounds and goes up to 135, I just don't think it's doable. However, Dana mentioned actually similar kind of, he didn't give the same reasoning. He didn't say that he's not interested in Amanda because of the size difference or whatever. He said what he would prefer is actually a Zhang Wei Li moving up and fighting Valentina for a champ status at 125. And I think that is a much more compelling fight, a much more competitive fight. That's the fight I would much rather see. And I think it's someone that can actually challenge Valentina, especially if she can get through her next challenger and Jessica Andrade.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like, since she has 2 losses to Amanda, I mean, it kind of doesn't make sense to go for a trilogy right away. Like I think you can still build Valentina up even more. And, you know, once she has like an unreal amount of title defenses, you know, then she can sort of move up and maybe challenge her. But at the end of the day, I agree with you. I don't think that's a competitive fight. I mean, Amanda always says she's so humble. She's like, you know, I'm really just like a BJJ fighter. You know, I have incredible Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and I'm not a great striker, but like she can strike pretty fantastically. Yeah. So I think a fight that would make more sense is Wei Li moving up.
I think maybe if she beats Wei Li, if she beats Zhang Wei Li, then I guess you can start to argue, okay, you know what, Amanda's all she has left. If she beats both Jessica Andrade and Zhang Wei Li, I mean, now you really can't deny her that opportunity. But I just think that yes, Valentina will have the speed. I don't think that she'll have the power advantage. I wish she won't have the power advantage over Amanda. I don't think she has enough power to put Amanda out. And I think Amanda's takedowns and BJJ ability is just going to be too much for Valentina and her size and strength.